Hey everybody, it's Dr. B, and we're starting Module 1, the Introductory Trauma-Informed Care and Resilience Certification course. We call it Ticker 1. And the first class in this module, Module 1, is called Adverse Childhood Experiences, also known as ACEs, Attachment and Resilience. So let's get started. So I want to read you some guiding principles about understanding trauma-informed care. This is how I view trauma-informed care. Adopting a trauma-informed approach is not accomplished through any single particular technique or checklist. It requires constant attention, caring awareness, sensitivity, and possibly a cultural change at an organizational level. Ongoing internal organizational assessment and quality improvement, as well as engagement with community stakeholders, will help to embed this approach, which can be augmented with organizational development and practice improvements. So we want to implement trauma-informed care across all of our organizations, across our families, our schools, our systems in our community. And we can only do that by staying attuned to the process. Module 1, Introductory Trauma-Informed Care, Ticker, remember, and Resilience Certification. Class 1, ACEs, Attachment and Resiliency. In this class, we're going to talk about infant attachment, expanded attachment theory, what the ACEs study, what does it mean? And then we're going to talk about, well, you're going to go listen to the podcast Triumph After Trauma, which is also about ACEs and attachment and resilience. Here we go. So the most important thing about building resilience and the most basic concept that we all need to know as we dive into this really hardy material is that our earliest relationships set the stage for all of our future relationships. So how we engage in relationships as babies actually impacts how we engage with partners and people later on in our lives as adults. Super fascinating. All right, we can't get around infant attachment without talking about John Bowlby. John Bowlby really set the stage for understanding infant attachment. He's a British psychologist, and he's most well known for his work in child development and attachment. And one of the things that he says is the mother-infant bond is the result of an evolved system. So that means that our brain is evolving as we build this relationship and bond with a mother and an infant. Now, this is known as neuroscience. So some would argue, I would argue, that Bowlby is at the front end of some of the cutting edge neuroscience that we're seeing today in totally different kinds of technology. All right. So ACEs, and I'm going to say the phrase, Adverse Childhood Experiences, it's an acronym, and infant attachment go together. Well, I mean, ideally they don't go together, but oftentimes they do go together. So in an attempt to understand the relationship between the two, we have to understand the relationship between the psychological and the physiological consequences of human connectedness. What does that mean? That means that people connect with other people, and that creates a reaction, a physiological response in our body and our mind that build our neurobiology, our brain networking system, and helps us to understand the world through our psychological lens. So ACEs and attachment do go hand in hand, and you're going to see why as we move through this class as well as the following classes. Next slide, please. I love this picture. It's a great picture for imitation. It's a great picture for resilience. It's a great picture for just so many things. But so children need sensitive adults in their lives because sensitive adults offer children and infants consistent, predictable environments. And that turns into a sense of competence and resilience. Now, that information, that concept came from a woman named Emmy Werner. She wrote the book Vulnerable but Invincible, and it's a longitudinal study that she did over the span of 50 years. And she really is the shero of resilience. So when we think about sensitive adults, they're so important to building resilience in childhood that carries over into adulthood. One of the things I want to say, and you're going to hear me say it over and over and over again, is that resiliency is built in early childhood and infancy. It is not built in adulthood. Does that mean you can't have a resiliency in adulthood? No. I mean, you can. You can strengthen resiliency in adulthood, but your resiliency foundation is paved in early childhood. Okay, so ACEs and neuroscience, adverse childhood experiences and neuroscience. Repeated interactions that are consistent and predictable lay the foundation with deep neural pathways in the brain. So when we do things over and over again, peekaboo, 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 these lay the foundation for the baby that, oh, we're playing a game. Oh, sometimes things go away and then they come back. These lay the foundation of information for a baby at the very beginning that we often don't ever even think about. But that predictability, when I do this, is going to come with this, is so important to early development. And it's why peekaboo has persisted as a very, very important game in infancy for 100 years. We also influence learning and loving across the lifespan when we repeat things to children, when we have consistent predictability. As the baby learns how to guess what's going to happen next in the environment, we teach the baby really how to drive the car on the road, because we're teaching the baby about relationships. We're teaching the baby about the give and take of relationships. And that in early infancy and early childhood really sets the stage for that give and take of relationships later on down the road, and different kinds of relationships. So consistency and predictability are critical to neurodevelopment, number one, but also to healthy relationship building, number two, and being able to anticipate what's going to happen next in the environment. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so we're still talking about adverse childhood experiences in neuroscience. Unfortunately, chaos, uncertainty, and fear do exactly the same thing in the brain. Early interactions are the critical foundation for future mental and physical health. Now, what does that mean? That if you have negative experiences in early childhood, that you're not going to have a healthy foundation for mental or physical health? We know that's not true because of resiliency. We know that there are children who overcome adversity and do thrive, and people who do that. So we know that it's not all or nothing. But what we're going to learn from the ACEs study, which we're going to talk about here in just a little bit, is that there are correlations to mental and physical health that are linked to adverse childhood experiences or trauma that impact our health and well-being. So what we need to know is that now we can look inside the brain and we can see things that are happening. So we can look inside the brain and say, oh, wow, when things are chaotic or uncertain or fear-based, then we can see that the brain is responding in the same way or firing in the same way. All right, next slide, please. All right. In case you don't know, I pretty much adore this boy because he's mine. He's not that little anymore, but this is one of my favorite pictures of him. And he's 24 now, but sometimes I like to see my kids in my classes, so I throw them in randomly. Attachment research reveals that securely attached children have better cognitive development, social development, language proficiency, and greater resilience. So what we need to understand and appreciate is that our resiliency, our cognition, our social skills, our language, all are linked to our earliest attachments. So it's so important that we begin to make a monumental shift into focusing on the power and the protective factors of early childhood and infancy, because the bang for our buck is so huge when we do that. Next slide, please. So let's talk about expanded attachment theory. So the attachment relationship really creates the central foundation from which the mind develops. So remember, you can't exist in isolation when you're a baby because you don't have the ability to take care of yourself or to survive. Humans are born way less developed than other species. You can see here the sea turtles who are born literally, they come out of an egg and they crawl off to the ocean and swim away, no parents even around. So babies are not like that. If the baby is born and no parents are around or caregivers are around, what happens? We know the baby dies. So we can't, babies need a relationship in order to survive. Human adaptation is also required for survival. So a baby's brain is not fully developed. It has to be built around the environment that the baby is born into in order for the baby to be able to adapt to and survive in the environment in which it's born. And so these are two very important concepts to recognize, that number one, and this is super just interesting and cool, the reason that babies are born so immature, one of the reasons is because women walk on two legs. We walk upright. We're bipedal. And in order to be able to carry a baby for 10 months, like we can only really carry about a 10-pound baby. And then we have to deliver it or the baby will get too big and won't be able to pass through and have a vaginal delivery. So there's this, they have to be born early and young and immature, but then there's also this counter of caregiving and protectiveness in order to create the adaptability in the environment for survival and relationship. So I hope that makes sense, but we are not born turtles. We do not come out of the womb ready to go with our lives. We have a lot of needs that have to get met. And we have a lot of loving relationships that have to teach us things before we're ready to spark on our own. All right, next slide, please. Okay, this is a hard picture to look at. This is a hard picture for me to look at. Insecure attachments appear to be related to higher occurrences of psychiatric disturbances, including anxiety and mood disorders. We know this to be true now. Like there's really no question that children who are left in isolation without loving relationships often actually die. You know, people need human connection. They need contact with other people. And so when just provided the necessity kinds of care like food, diapering, a safe space to be in isn't enough. It's not enough. We need relationship. Children need interaction and engagement from adults in order to survive and thrive and grow into healthy adults. So anxiety and mood disorders, why would insecure attachments be linked to those? Think about it. If we're not with somebody who takes care of us, who helps us to feel secure in our environment, then we're going to feel insecure. And what would another word for insecure seem like? Well, anxiety. I feel scared. I feel insecure. And that becomes neurologically wired into the brain as when I'm alone or when I'm left or when I can't get a response from somebody, it triggers anxiety or anxious feelings, which can also then lead into other mood disorders like depression or reactive disorders, maybe bipolar or a variety of different things. And I don't want to, jump into that arena quite yet. So, but it makes sense that anxiety and insecure attachment go hand in hand because insecurity comes from an anxious state of not being able to get the care we need from a loving, attuned caregiver. Next slide, please. Okay, I love this picture too, because look at that baby and that mama or caregiver. I don't know if she's the mama, but it's a sweet, you can tell they have a loving relationship. And where we've gone with attachment theory is that we've shifted away from attachment theory being a cognitive science, really about learning new things, to an affective science. And it's much more about being concerned with relating to others. So the dance that a caregiver and a baby give, let's go back to peekaboo, peekaboo, ha ha ha, laugh and fun, or singing a song and the baby chimes in with the words the baby knows, or playing a game, patty cake. All of these things, yes, they're about learning how to insert the word or do the patty cake pattern or those kinds of things, but really they're about relating. The baby's not playing any game like that for learning. The baby's playing the game to relate. The baby is playing the game in order to engage and learn how to read the cues that are all over their caregiver's face to help them figure out how to get around and get things done in the world, even as a tiny, tiny, tiny baby. So it's so interesting and exciting to do infant research and understand the micro emotions of infants, as well as their capacity for reading micro emotions in their adult caregivers. So next slide, please. All right. I love this series of slides because I think it's really helpful. Again, we're still talking about expanded attachment theory. So if we have an adult who has unresolved loss, so a loss of a parent, a loss of a sibling, a loss of anything, and then we add to that, they have a primary insecure attachment. So the main person in their life who would be their secure attachment is insecure. So sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. Unpredictable, remember, not consistent. Then that equals less than optimum outcomes for children. So remember, unresolved loss, insecure attachment. I've lost something and nobody is here to help me figure out what to do about it. That's really what I'm saying. I've lost and I don't have anybody to help me predict or consistently figure out what I'm supposed to do. So the outcome of that is to try a whole bunch of different things, chaos, or melt down, loss of control. And so that leads to less than optimum outcomes. We can see that because if you have to go through a whole bunch of things to figure out what works, and it only works some of the time, then you're not as well off as if somebody had taught you in a loving way through observation that, oh, you have an unresolved loss. I'm here for you consistently and predictably to support you through this loss. Then we have more positive outcomes. Next slide, please. Are you there? Oh, yeah. Okay, so again, thinking back to that other slide, if a child has an unresolved loss, death of a parent, death of a sibling, some huge loss in their early childhood, but they do have a primary secure attachment, somebody who helps them to get through it, holds them through the tears, talks to them about what happened, helps them feel secure that things are going to be okay in the future. That's how we get to resilience. That's how we build resilience in early childhood and infancy, is we continuously have the kind of give and take in a relationship that walks children down a path that makes them remember that things will be okay again. And that's so important for children to be able to predict how to make things okay again and to find ways to consistently make things okay again after something happens, after there's a disruption. So that's how we get to resiliency. We know how to do it. We just have to build all of our systems around these concepts because we do understand how the brain does wire, and that wiring is linked to all the things in our environment that make it fire. So we'll talk more about that though as we dig deeper. We are only in class 1. So next slide, please. Continuing on with our conversation about expanded attachment theory. Love this picture of the lioness and her baby cubs. But if you know anything about the pride, the lion's pride, you know that there is a lot of trauma and loss. And the trauma and loss response is directly related to the attachment security of the adult. So let me say that again and try to explain exactly what that means. When a child or an infant or somebody experiences a trauma or a loss, how they recover from that trauma or loss, or how they thrive out of that adversity, is directly related to their attachment security to an adult, to a loving, attuned adult caregiver. So if you think about these babies and their lioness mama, see, I'm like holding the baby, and she's cuddling up with them and holding them close. That to me says, okay, I have a very secure, attached, attuned, loving relationship with my lioness mama, even in the face of trauma and loss. Because the mama teaches the babies how to respond to trauma and loss. It does not mean that she or he, it can be, it doesn't have to be a mama, it can be a caregiver, a loving, attuned caregiver. Doesn't mean that they have to pretend the loss didn't happen. That would be unhealthy. That would be a total denial of feelings. We want them to be able to acknowledge the feelings, acknowledge the loss, own how painful that is, but also be somewhat inspired at the ability to move on and move forward, because that really is at the heart of resilience. And the definition of resilience is to be able to grieve a loss, experience the pain, overcome or learn lessons from whatever it is that happened, grow in insights about ourselves, and then move forward. So you can see how much better that feels if you can go through something like that with another person rather than having to go through that emotional roller coaster all alone, and especially all alone as a child. At least if you go through that all alone as an adult, if somebody has ridden that roller coaster with you a few times and explained how it's going to go, it feels so much better. It feels so much less scary, and there's a lot less anxiety and even the ability to pull out of depression more easily. Okay, adverse childhood experiences. I haven't jumped into these yet, but we are now going to talk about the adverse childhood experiences study and how ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, are highly correlated with long-term consequences on mental and physical health. That means that what happens to children in childhood, birth to 18, it impacts our physical and mental health in adulthood. Okay, take that in for a second, because it's so important to really understand that, oh yeah, what happened to me can have a long-term physical or mental health impact. And I need to be aware of that. It's part of my health history. It's part of my health care. It's not separate. Mental health is not separate from physical health. So when we recognize that there's science, there's highly correlated research that shows these consequences very targeted and specifically, we can't really ignore them anymore. We can't just kind of brush off mental health as fluff psychology. It's real, and it has an impact on our body and our mind and our brain and our contributions to society. So let's watch a video, and this is about attachment. Let me set it up for you a little bit. So back at the very, I don't know, I can't remember who did the research. Why is this name eluding me?
Harry Harlow.
Oh, thank you. I'm like, that was the monkey guy. Harry Harlow.
Okay, so start it over.
Okay, all right. Okay, so let's watch a video. Let me set it up for you a little bit. So Harry Harlow decided that he wanted to quantify love. He wanted to quantify attachment and relationships. And so he did this. You can never do this with real babies. It happens accidentally and has been researched in real situations. However, in order to do controlled studies, he used rhesus monkeys, which is very heartbreaking. So I want to give you a warning that this is hard video to watch, because it is about babies being separated early from their mamas, and their mamas being separated from their babies. So if you've ever had the experience of losing somebody that you love and what happens, it can be very painful to watch. So I just want to give you that warning up ahead. But this research is so powerful and so instrumental in helping us to recognize the power of the neurobiological response to separation and isolation. So let's watch this video.
Conquest. The search for new knowledge about our universe, our world, and ourselves.
This monkey is an orphan, separated from his mother since the day of his birth. Literally, his life hangs by a thread, a soft cheesecloth pad that is his only companion, his only comfort. Once a day, the pad is removed for cleaning.
This is the laboratory of psychologist Harry Harlow.
Troubled, distressed, permanently deprived.
He is studying monkeys to better understand human relationships.
He may die for want of love.
Harlow believes he can use science to study love. With a series of pioneering experiments, he explores territory where few scientists have ventured.
Harlow said that there was such a thing as a science of love, for example, that love, the kind of intimacy that characterized relationships between mothers and infants, although in his case he studied monkeys, could be the object of science, that you literally could move love into a laboratory, put it under a microscope.
Harlow is studying love because he believes it makes an indelible impact on a young life. The relationship between a mother and her child, what Harlow calls our earliest social environment, could hold the key to explaining behavior throughout life. Harlow designs a set of ingenious experiments. He raises a baby monkey, allowing it to choose between two surrogate mothers, a wire mother that feeds it, and a cloth mother that doesn't. A cloth mother that Harlow thinks might provide something else, comfort and love.
Here's baby 106, weaned on a wire mother. He's going to the wire mother.
But this infant quickly runs to the cloth mother, where he will stay for the next 18 hours cuddling. In Harlow's mind, choosing nurturing over sustenance. In another experiment, Harlow creates a fearful situation. Whom does the infant turn to now?
Let's find out what his reactions to his mother are when we frighten him. He's scared, all right. And he does what any child will do in a similar situation. He was running to his mother, to touch her, to drive away his fear.
To Harlow, there is something about the experience of comfort and love, even more than food, that seems crucial to all these monkeys. But what happens when the infant is raised alone, without any mother at all, wire or cloth? In this situation, the orphan monkey stays alone. He won't even go to the cloth mother when frightened, but retreats into his own world. Harlow believes he has shown how want of love can damage an infant for life, and he worries the same is true for people.
What comes through loud and clear in Harry Harlow's experiment was that the early experience and the environment were crucial to the healthy development of the infant child. And that in a sense, if you messed up, if the right kind of maternal presence was not there during the critical years, then that infant might grow up to be an adult incapable of forming healthy relationships with other kinds of people.